The massive ship floated in the darkness of space like a giant metal city. Its name was Harmony's Edge, and it belonged to the Galactic Council. Inside this enormous vessel, representatives from 12 different alien species had gathered for one of the most important meetings in galactic history. Lisa Carter walked through the long corridors of the ship, her footsteps echoing softly on the metal floor. She was a human woman in her early 30s, with brown hair tied back in a simple style and wearing a plain blue diplomatic uniform. Next to her walked Captain Jack Morrison, a tall man with short black hair and kind eyes. He carried a small bag with their documents and communication devices. Other beings moved through the corridors around them. Some were so tall they had to duck under doorways. Others were so small they rode on floating platforms. Lisa had studied all the different species for months, but seeing them in person was still amazing. A creature that looked like a giant insect with 4 arms clicked past them. Its green shell gleamed under the ship's lights, and its compound eyes watched everything at once. This was one of the Zephyrians, a species that lived in massive hives and thought as one mind. Behind the insect-like being floated a creature made entirely of blue crystal. It hummed softly as it moved, and colors shifted through its translucent body like light through a prism. This was a Vorthik, one of the oldest and wisest species in the galaxy. But the most impressive beings were the Kethver. They stood 9 feet tall, with thick gray skin and muscles like steel cables. Their eyes were small and black, and their mouths were full of sharp teeth. They wore armor that looked like it was built for war, and they carried weapons that could cut through metal like paper. Lisa tried not to stare as a group of Kethver soldiers marched past them. Their heavy boots made the floor shake with each step. One of them looked down at her and Jack, and Lisa could see something like amusement in its dark eyes. "The humans have arrived," the Kethver said to his companions in a voice like grinding stone. "Look how small they are." The other soldiers laughed, a sound like rocks falling down a mountain. Lisa pretended not to hear them and kept walking. Jack's hand moved toward his weapon, but Lisa touched his arm gently and shook her head. "Not yet," she whispered so quietly that only he could hear. They reached the main conference room, and Lisa stopped to look around. The room was huge, with a ceiling that reached up into darkness. In the center was a round table with 12 seats, each one designed for a different species. Some were normal chairs, others were platforms or pools of liquid. Representatives were already taking their places. The Kethver War Commander sat in a chair that looked more like a throne. His name was Thixul, and he was the leader of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. His armor was covered in marks that showed all the battles he had won. The Zephyrian Queen Xylera settled onto her platform with a soft, buzzing sound. Her compound eyes reflected the lights in the room like tiny mirrors. She spoke for billions of her kind, all connected by invisible mental links. Elder Zenth, the Vorthik representative, flowed into his seat like liquid crystal. His body changed color slowly, showing his thoughts and emotions in patterns that most species couldn't understand. There were others, too. The Malari, who looked like walking trees with silver bark. The Nexus, mechanical beings with red glowing eyes. The Centauri, who were almost human, but with pale blue skin and no hair at all. Lisa and Jack took their seats at the table. Their chairs were simple and plain compared to the exotic seats around them. Lisa placed her notebook in front of her and opened it to a fresh page. She took out a simple pen and wrote the date at the top. War Commander Thixul stood up, his armor clanking. As he moved, when he spoke, his voice filled the entire room. "We are here to discuss the Kepler 442 system," he said. "This system contains rare minerals that many species want, but the Kethver Empire has the strongest claim." Queen Xylera's buzzing grew louder. The Zephyrian hive was the first to discover these minerals. We have rights too. Elder Zenth's body flashed through several colors. The Vorthek have studied this system for over 1,000 years. Our claims based on ancient law. Other voices joined in, each species arguing for their right to the valuable system. The room grew loud with different languages and sounds. Some beings clicked, others hummed, and a few made sounds like whale songs. Through it all, Lisa sat quietly and took notes. She wrote down who said what and when they said it. Sometimes she asked simple questions like, "How many ships do you have there?" Or, "When did you first visit the system?" The other representatives began to notice her questions. To them, she seemed like a child asking about things she didn't understand. They started to smile when she spoke, and some even laughed quietly. "The human wants to know about our military strength," one of the Malari said, his voice like wind. "Through leaves. How cute." War Commander Thexul looked at Lisa with the same expression he might use to watch a pet animal. "Human, your species has only been in space for a few decades. Perhaps you should listen more and speak less." Lisa nodded politely. "Of course, War Commander. I'm just trying to understand the situation." "Understanding is not enough," Thexul replied. "In space, only strength matters. Your species has no strength." Jack's jaw tightened, but Lisa remained calm. She made another note in her book and looked up with a friendly smile. "You're probably right," she said. "We're still learning about how things work out here." The alien representatives exchanged glances. Some of them were starting to wonder why humans had been invited to this meeting at all. Earth had no military fleet to speak of, no advanced weapons, and no history of conquest. They seemed harmless as the day wore on. The arguments grew more heated. The Kethver made threats. The Zephyrians buzzed angrily. The Vorthik flashed warning colors. But Lisa just sat there, taking notes and asking her simple questions. During a break, she overheard two Centauri talking. "Why are the humans even here?" one asked. "I heard they found something interesting in that system," the other replied. "But look at them. They're like children playing with adults." Lisa pretended not to hear them. She sipped her water and reviewed her notes. Jack leaned over to her. "They're not taking us seriously," he whispered. "Good," Lisa replied, so softly that only he could hear. "That's exactly what we want." When the meeting resumed, War Commander Thexul stood again. His black eyes swept around the table, stopping on each representative. "This discussion has gone on long enough," he announced. "The Kethver Empire will take control of the Kepler 442 system. Any species that objects can try to stop us." The room fell silent. Even the bravest species knew better than to challenge the Kethver military directly. Their ships were faster, their weapons stronger, and their warriors had never lost a major battle. Lisa raised her hand like a student in school. "Excuse me, War Commander, what about the other species' rights?" Thexul looked at her with something like pity. "Rights belong to those strong enough to defend them, human. Your species will learn this lesson soon enough." Lisa nodded and made another note. Around the table, the other representatives were starting to accept that the meeting was over. The Kethver had won before the real negotiations had even begun. But Lisa Carter was not worried. She closed her notebook and folded her hands on the table. In her mind, she was already 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. The aliens thought they were looking at a harmless diplomat from a weak species. They had no idea what was really sitting at their table. The next day brought worse news. War Commander Thexul entered the conference room with heavy steps, his armor gleaming under the lights. Behind him walked 3 other Kethver officers, all wearing the same proud expressions. Lisa sat in her chair, notebook ready as always. She had spent the night reading reports and making calculations. Jack stood behind her, his face calm but his eyes alert. "I have an announcement," Exol said, his voice booming across the room. "The Kethver fleet has begun mining operations in the Kepler 442 system. As of this morning, 12 of our ships are extracting minerals from the asteroid belts." "Queen!" Xylara's buzzing rose to an angry pitch. "This is against galactic law. The system is still disputed." Elder Zenth's crystalline body flashed red and orange, colors that meant extreme displeasure among his people. "The Vorthik protest this action. You cannot simply take what you want." War Commander Thexol laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I can take whatever my ships can hold. That is the only law that matters in space." Other representatives began to shout protests, but Thexol raised his hand for silence. His black eyes swept around the table, and one by one, the voices died away. "Any species that interferes with Kethver operations will be considered hostile," he announced. "My fleet has orders to defend our claim with all necessary force." Lisa made a note in her book. She wrote down the number of ships and the time of the announcement. Then she looked up at the war commander. "Excuse me," she said in her polite voice. "Are there any other ships in the system?" Thexul's expression showed mild annoyance. "Several species have sent scouts to watch our operations. We are allowing this for now. What about human ships?" Lisa asked. "Have you seen any of ours?" The war commander's officers exchanged glances. One of them leaned forward and whispered something in Thexula's ear. The big alien's eyes narrowed. "As a matter of fact, yes," he said slowly. 3 human vessels were detected in the system yesterday. They appeared to be surveying the outer planets. Lisa nodded and made another note. "I see. Are they still there?" "No," Thexul replied, and now his voice carried a threatening tone. "They are our guests." The room went very quiet. Every representative understood what that meant. The humans' ships had been captured. Jack's hand moved toward his weapon, but Lisa touched his arm gently. She kept her expression calm and friendly. "Our guests?" she asked. "That's very kind of you, War Commander. Are they being treated well?" Thexul smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "They are alive, which is more than they deserve for trespassing. In Kethver space, the crews are being held aboard our ships while we decide what to do with them." "How many people?" Lisa asked, her pen ready. 43 humans total," one of the Kethver officers replied. "They offered no resistance when we captured them." Lisa wrote down the number. Around the table, other representatives were watching her carefully. Some looked sympathetic. Others seemed curious about how the humans would respond. "I'm sure they appreciate your hospitality," Lisa said. "When might we expect them to be released?" War Commander Thexul leaned back in his chair. "That depends on several factors. First, Earth must officially recognize Kethver sovereignty over the entire Kepler 442 system. Second, your species must pay a fine for illegal trespass. Third, you must agree never to send ships to that system again." "And if we don't agree?" Lisa asked. The war commander's smile grew wider. "Then your people will remain our guests for a very long time. Space is dangerous, and accidents happen to prisoners." The threat was clear. The Kethver were holding 43 humans hostage to force Earth's surrender. It was a classic military tactic, and it had worked many times before. Queen Xylara's compound eyes focused on Lisa. "The Zephyrian Hive offers sympathy for your situation, but we cannot risk war with the Kethver Empire." Elder Zenth's body cycled through sad blue colors. "The Vorthik also regret this development. However, we must consider the safety of our own people." One by one, the other representatives expressed their sympathy, but made it clear they would not help. The Kethver were too strong, and the humans were too weak. It was a simple equation, Lisa listened to each speaker and made notes. She thanked them for their kind words and understanding. Through it all, she remained perfectly calm. "War Commander," she said finally, "may I ask where exactly our people are being held?" Dexul's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why do you want to know?" "I need to report their location to Earth," Lisa replied. "Their families will want to know they're safe." The War Commander considered this. It seemed reasonable enough. "They are aboard 3 of our heavy cruisers in the Kepler 442 system. The ships are part of our mining fleet." "Are they close to the mining operations?" Lisa asked. "Close enough to watch our work," Nexul said with satisfaction. "They can see exactly what happens to those who challenge Keth for power." Lisa made one more note and closed her notebook. "Thank you for the information, War Commander. I'll need to contact Earth about your terms." "You have 24 hours, Dexul announced. "After that, we will consider your silence to be rejection of our offer." The meeting ended with tension thick in the air. As representatives filed out, many avoided looking at Lisa and Jack. They felt bad for the humans, but they were not willing to risk their own species' safety. Lisa and Jack walked back to their quarters in silence. Only when they were alone did Jack speak. 43 people, he said quietly. "They're using our own people against us." Lisa sat down at her desk and opened her notebook again. She studied the numbers she had written down. Ship positions, crew sizes, fleet locations. Everything was there. "Jack," she said, "send a message to Earth. Tell them the Kethfor have our people." "What else should I tell them?" Lisa looked up from her notes. For just a moment, her calm expression slipped, and Jack saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. "Tell them it's time for Phase 2, she said. Jack nodded and moved to their communication device. As he began encoding the message, Lisa returned to her notes. She drew lines between different pieces of information, making connections that others had missed. The aliens thought they were looking at a desperate human diplomat, forced to choose between her people's lives and her species' pride. They expected her to beg, to plead, to offer anything to get the hostages back. They had no idea that everything was going exactly according to plan. Lisa picked up her pen and began writing a new set of notes. At the top of the page, she wrote 3 words: mining ships armed. Outside their window, the stars looked down on the Harmony's edge like cold, watching eyes. In the depths of space, forces were moving that would change everything. The Kethver had made their move, just as Lisa had known they would. Now it was time for humanity to show the galaxy what they were really capable of. The next morning would bring revelations that would shake the foundations of galactic power. But for now, Lisa Carter sat quietly in her room, planning the next phase of the most dangerous game humanity had ever played. The aliens still thought she was harmless. Tomorrow, they would learn how wrong they were. The 3rd day of negotiations began with War Commander Thexul looking very pleased with himself. He strode into the conference room with the confidence of someone who held all the cards. His officers followed behind him, their weapons gleaming. And their armor-polished Lisa entered quietly, as she had every day before. She carried her notebook and pen, and her expression was the same calm, friendly look she always wore. Jack walked beside her, his face giving nothing away. The other representatives were already seated. They looked uncomfortable, glancing between the humans and the Kethver. Everyone knew about the hostages, and everyone expected this to be the day the humans surrendered. "Well, human," Thexul said as he took his seat, "have you spoken with your leaders on Earth?" Lisa opened her notebook to a fresh page. "Yes, War Commander. They received my report." "And their response?" "They're very concerned about our peoples." "Safety," Lisa replied. "They want to know more about their situation." Thexul's laugh boomed across the room. "Their situation is simple. They are prisoners of the Kethver Empire. They will remain prisoners until Earth accepts our terms. I understand, Lisa said, making a note. Could you tell me more about the ships they're on? Are they military vessels? Heavy cruisers, Vexul replied proudly. The Bloodfang, the Irewill, and the Darkstorm. Each one carries enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Lisa wrote down the names carefully. And they're all in the Kepler 442 system? Yes, along with 9 other ships in our mining fleet. Your people have front row seats to watch Kethver efficiency in action. Around the table, other representatives shifted uncomfortably. They could see what was happening. The war commander was playing with the human diplomat like a cat with a mouse. Queen Xylara's buzzing grew softer, a sign of distress among her people. War commander, perhaps we could discuss terms that would be acceptable to all parties. The terms are not open for discussion, Vexul snapped. Earth will accept our demands, or their people will suffer the consequences. Elder Zenth's crystalline body flickered through worried colors. This approach seems unnecessarily harsh. Perhaps a more diplomatic solution. There is no diplomatic solution. Vexul roared, standing up to his full height. The Kethver Empire takes what it wants. We do not negotiate with inferior species. The room fell silent. Even the bravest representatives knew better than to challenge Vexul when he was in this mood. His hand rested on his weapon, and his black eyes promised violence to anyone who opposed him. Lisa looked up from her notebook. War Commander, May, I ask you something? Vexul turned his attention to her, his expression showing annoyance. What is it now, human? Are your ships maintaining close formation around the mining operations? Of course, Vexul replied. Proper military doctrine requires. He stopped suddenly, his eyes narrowing. Why do you ask? Lisa's pen moved across the paper as she made another note. I'm just trying to understand the tactical situation. Earth's leaders want to know exactly where their people are. Your people are exactly where they belong, Vexul said, his voice growing colder. In Kethver custody, surrounded by Kethver weapons. All 3 prison ships are close to your mining fleet? Lisa asked. Within protective range, Vexul confirmed. Nothing happens in that system without our knowledge. Lisa nodded and made one final note. Then she closed her notebook and looked up at the war commander. For the first time since the negotiations began, she wasn't smiling. War Commander Vexul, she said, and her voice was different now. It was still quiet, but there was something underneath it that made several aliens lean forward in their seats. What is it, human? Vexul demanded. I need to tell you something about those ships you captured, Lisa said. She placed her hands flat on the table and looked directly into the war commander's black eyes. They weren't survey ships. The room went completely quiet. Even the soft humming of the ship's engines seemed to fade away. Every representative was staring at Lisa, trying to understand what she meant. Vexul's hand moved to his weapon. Explain yourself. Lisa's calm expression was gone now, replaced by something cold and calculating. You asked me why I wanted to. Know about ship positions and formation distances. The answer is simple. I needed to confirm that your vessels are within the blast radius. Blast radius? Queen Xylara's buzzing rose to an alarmed pitch. What are you talking about? Vexul snarled. Lisa stood up slowly. Around the table, other representatives were beginning to look worried. Something was very wrong, and they could feel it in the air. War Commander, Lisa said, her voice now carrying an edge that seemed to cut through the silence. You made a mistake. You assumed those were survey ships because that's what you expected to find. But they weren't surveying anything. Jack stepped forward, his hand moving to his communication device. Ma'am, I'm receiving confirmation from the Celestial. Dawn, all packages are in position and ready. Packages? Elder Zenth's body flashed through rapid color changes. What packages? Lisa looked around the table, meeting the eyes of every representative. Those 3 ships you captured weren't carrying scientific equipment. They were carrying mining gear. Specifically, they were carrying antimatter charges designed for asteroid mining. The room erupted in shocked voices. Several representatives stood up, their chairs falling backward. Others began speaking rapidly in their native languages. That's impossible, Exul roared. Humans don't have antimatter technology. We don't have antimatter weapons, Lisa replied, her voice cutting through the chaos. But we do have antimatter mining equipment. We've been using it for years to harvest rare materials from our asteroid belt. The truth was beginning to dawn on the assembled aliens. The captured ships weren't helpless prisoners. They were bombs sitting in the middle of the Kethfor fleet. Each of those ships carries enough antimatter to destroy everything within a 50-kilometer radius, Lisa continued. And right now, they're all sitting next to your most valuable vessels. War Commander Thexul's face went through several expressions. Confusion, disbelief, then growing horror as the tactical implications became clear. You're lying, he said. But his voice lacked conviction. Jack held up his communication device. Sir, I'm getting reports from your fleet commanders. They're detecting massive antimatter signatures from the captured vessels. The readings are off the charts. Thexul grabbed his own communicator and began shouting orders in the Kethfor language. After a moment, his face went pale. They're refusing to cooperate, he said slowly. The human crews are saying they're prepared to die for their mission. Lisa nodded. That's because they volunteered for this mission, War Commander. They knew exactly what they were signing up for. Around the table, the other representatives were beginning to understand. The humans hadn't sent helpless survey ships to be captured. They had sent suicide bombers, disguised as innocent explorers. This is madness, Queen Xylera buzzed. No species would sacrifice their own people for a tactical advantage. Lisa turned to face her. Queen Xylera, you underestimate what humans will do to protect their home. Those 43 people didn't just volunteer to die. They volunteered to die knowing that their sacrifice would save millions of others. The room was in chaos now. Some representatives were demanding explanations. Others were calculating the strategic implications. But all of them were looking at Lisa Carter with new eyes. The harmless human diplomat was gone. In her place stood something far more dangerous. A representative of a species that was willing to turn their own people into weapons. The choice is simple, War Commander, Lisa said, her voice carrying clearly over the noise. Release our people and withdraw from the Kepler 442 system, or lose most of your fleet in a single moment. Thexul's communicator buzzed again. He listened for a moment. Then his face went completely white. They're not bluffing, he said quietly. Our scanners show enough antimatter to crack a moon. And the human crews are saying they're ready too. Detonate on command. Lisa smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. War Commander, you said that rights belong to those strong enough to defend them. Today, you're going to learn just how strong humanity really is. The galaxy was about to discover that the small, peaceful species from Earth had been hiding a terrible secret. When pushed too far, humans didn't just fight back. They fought back with a ruthlessness that even the Kethfor couldn't match. The negotiations were about to take a very different turn. The silence that followed Lisa's revelation was broken by the sound of War Commander Thexul's communicator buzzing frantically. He grabbed it with shaking hands and listened to the rapid reports coming from his fleet. Sir, came the voice of one of his ship commanders. We've run full scans on the captured vessels. The antimatter readings are confirmed. Each ship contains enough explosive power to destroy half our fleet. Dexul's face went from pale to ashen. Around the table, the other representatives were staring at Lisa with mixtures of fear and amazement. The small human woman had just revealed that her species had turned 3 of their own ships into massive bombs. "This is impossible," Dexul said, but his voice cracked as he spoke. "Your people would never sacrifice themselves like this." Lisa's expression remained cold and steady. "War Commander, that's where you made your biggest mistake. You assumed that because we prefer peace, we're afraid of death. You thought that, because we value life, we wouldn't risk it." Jack stepped closer to the table, his communication device still active. "Ma'am, Captain Rodriguez is reporting from the Starfire. All antimatter charges are armed and synchronized. She's asking for confirmation on detonation authority." The room erupted in panicked voices. Several representatives jumped up from their seats, some backing away from the table as if distance could protect them from what was happening. "Wait." Queen Xylara's buzzing reached a desperate pitch. "You can't be serious. Those are your own people." "Yes, they are," Lisa replied calmly. "And every single one of them volunteered for this mission. They knew they might not come home, and they accepted that risk." Elder Zent's crystalline body was flashing through colors so rapidly it looked like a rainbow having a seizure. "This is beyond anything we've ever seen. No species has ever used their own people as weapons like this." "That's because no species has ever faced what humanity is facing," Lisa said. "We're new to this galaxy, and every species we've met has tried to push us around. The Kethver are just the latest in a long line of bullies." War Commander Dexul was shouting orders into his communicator, trying to get his fleet to move away from the human ships. But it was too late. The formation was tight, designed to show strength and prevent escape. Now that same formation had become a trap. "Sir," came another voice from the communicator, "we're trying to maintain safe distance, but the human ships are matching our movements. Every time we move, they move with us." Lisa nodded approvingly. "Our people are well-trained. War Commander. They know how to stay close to high-value targets." "This is insane," Dexul roared. "You're willing to murder 43 of your own people just to make a point." "No," Lisa said quietly. "We're willing to sacrifice 43 heroes to save billions of others. Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? You're not just taking the Kepler 442 system. You're testing humanity's resolve." She walked around the table, moving closer to the towering alien commander. Despite being less than half his height, she somehow seemed to loom over him. "You want to know if we'll fight back when pushed. You want to know if we'll stand up to the big scary aliens who have been ruling this galaxy for centuries. Well, War Commander, now you know." Jack's communicator crackled to life. "This is Captain Martinez aboard the Sundance. All charges are green and ready. We're maintaining position relative to the Kethver heavy cruiser Bloodfang. If they move, we move." Another voice joined in. "Captain Thompson here, from the Moonbeam. We're locked onto the Iron Will. Their weapons are pointed at us, but they won't fire. They know what happens if they do." The third voice was calm and professional. "Rodriguez checking in from the Starfire. We're keeping pace with the Darkstorm. All systems nominal. All charges ready for detonation on your command. Ambassador." Lisa looked up at War Commander Dexul. "3 ships, War Commander. 3 suicide bombers sitting in the middle of your fleet. And their crews are talking to me right now, asking for permission to complete their mission." Dexul's communicator was buzzing constantly now. His fleet commanders were reporting from all over the Kepler 442 system. The situation was worse than anyone had imagined. "Sir, we count 12 of our ships within the blast radius of the 3 human vessels. If they detonate, we'll lose a third of our mining fleet. The human ships are maintaining perfect formation with our vessels. We can't shake them. Sir, the antimatter readings are increasing. They're priming the charges. Dexul slammed his fist on the table, making the whole room shake. This is madness. You can't seriously be considering this. I'm not considering anything, Lisa replied. The decision was made weeks ago, when we first detected your fleet moving toward the Kepler 442 system. Everything that's happened since then has been according to plan. The other representatives were beginning to understand the full scope of what they were witnessing. The humans hadn't just stumbled into this situation. They had planned it from the beginning. You knew we would capture your ships, Queen Zalara said, her voice filled with amazement. We counted on it, Lisa confirmed. The Kethfer have a pattern. They always capture first and negotiate later. We simply gave you exactly what you expected to find. Elder Zenth's colors had stabilized into a deep purple, a Vorthic color for profound respect. You planned this entire scenario. The diplomatic mission, the captured ships, everything. Not everything, Lisa said. We hoped you would be reasonable. We hoped you would agree to share the system peacefully. But we prepared for the more likely outcome. War Commander Dexul was having a heated conversation with his fleet commanders. But it was clear that his options were limited. The human ships were too close to his vessels, and any attempt to destroy them would result in the death of thousands of his own people. Ma'am, Jack said, I'm getting reports from our people in the field. They're asking for a time frame. How long should they maintain position? Lisa looked around the table at all the alien representatives. They were watching her with a mixture of fear and respect that hadn't been there before. Tell them to maintain position until we have a resolution, she said. And tell them that Earth is proud of what they're doing. The voices of the human ship captains came through clearly over the communicator. We're ready to do whatever it takes, Ambassador. Just give us the word, ma'am. It's been an honor serving with you all. War Commander Dixul's face was a mask of rage and frustration. His mighty fleet, the pride of the Kethfer Empire, had been outmaneuvered by a handful of human mining ships. You're all insane, he said. No sane species would do this. Lisa smiled, and for the first time in days, it was a genuine expression. War Commander, that's the difference between your species and mine. You fight for conquest. We fight for survival. And when humans fight for survival, we don't hold anything back. The room was silent, except for the constant buzzing of communicators and the soft humming of the ship's engines. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their military might. It was their willingness to sacrifice everything for what they believed in. And right now, 43 humans were floating in space, ready to die to prove that their species would not be pushed around by anyone. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. War Commander Dexul stood frozen, his hand hovering over his weapon, his black eyes locked on Lisa Carter. Around the table, 11 different alien species watched the confrontation. That would reshape the galaxy's balance of power. Lisa's communicator crackled to life. Ambassador, this is Captain Rodriguez. We're showing movement in the Kethfer fleet. 3 ships are trying to break formation. Maintain your positions. Lisa replied calmly. Mirror their movements exactly. Copy that, ma'am. We're staying right with them. War Commander Dexul's face went through several emotions. Rage, frustration, and finally something that looked like grudging respect. He had been outplayed, and he knew it. You planned this. From the beginning, he said slowly. The diplomatic mission, the questions about our fleet positions, everything. Not everything, Lisa corrected. We hoped you would be reasonable. We hoped you would agree to peaceful coexistence. But we prepared for the more likely outcome. Elder Zenth's crystalline body had settled into a deep blue color, the Vorthic expression of profound contemplation. You allowed us to underestimate. You appeared weak and harmless while positioning your pieces on the board. We learned from watching other species, Lisa explained. Every time someone tried to negotiate with the Kethvar, they came with obvious strength. Ships, weapons, threats. And every time, the Kethvar simply brought more ships and bigger weapons. Queen Xylara's buzzing had softened to barely audible levels. So you came with hidden strength instead. We came with the one thing the Kethvar couldn't match, Lisa said. The willingness to sacrifice everything for our principles. War Commander. Thexul as communicator buzzed again. He listened to the report, his face growing paler by the second. Sir, we've completed our analysis. If those charges detonate, the blast will destroy 12 of our ships, including 3 heavy cruisers. That represents 30% of our mining fleet and over 8,000 personnel. The room fell silent. Even the most warlike species in the galaxy could do that kind of math. The Kethvar Empire was facing the potential loss of a significant portion of their fleet. And the human crews? Thexul asked quietly. They're maintaining position. Our scanners show they're actively arming the charges. They seem completely committed to their mission. Lisa nodded approvingly. They are committed. War Commander. Every single one of them volunteered for this mission. They knew they might not come home. Why would they do such a thing? Asked the Molari representative, his voice like wind through leaves. Because they believe in something bigger than themselves, Lisa replied. They believe in humanity's right to exist freely in this galaxy, and they're willing to die to defend that right. Jack stepped forward, his communication device still active. Ma'am, I'm receiving a message from Earth. Fleet Command is asking for a status report. Tell them we're in the final phase, Lisa said. Tell them our people are performing above and beyond expectations. War Commander Thexul was having a heated conversation with his advisors. They were speaking in the Kethvar language, but their gestures made their meaning clear. They were arguing about whether to risk their fleet or back down. Finally, Thexul turned back to Lisa. What are your terms? Simple, Lisa replied. Withdraw all Kethvar forces from the Kepler 442 system. Release our people unharmed. And agree to share the system's resources according to established galactic law. And if we refuse? Lisa's expression didn't change. Then 43 heroes die for their cause, and you lose 1/3 of your fleet. The choice is yours. Thexul as communicator crackled to life. Sir, the human ships are moving into final attack position. They're requesting final authorization from their command. All eyes turned to Lisa. She held up her communicator so everyone could hear. Captain Rodriguez, this is Ambassador Carter. What's your status? All charges are armed and ready, ma'am. We're in position for maximum effect. Just give us the word. Captain. Martinez here. We're ready to complete the mission on your command. Thompson reporting. All systems green. We're ready to serve. Lisa looked around the table at all the alien representatives. They were seeing something they had never witnessed before. A species willing to sacrifice their own people to defend their principles. War Commander, she said quietly, you have 60 seconds to make your decision. The room was completely silent, except for the soft humming of the ship's engines. Thexul stood like a statue, his mind racing through the tactical possibilities. But every scenario led to the same conclusion. The humans had him trapped. 50 seconds, Lisa announced. Thexul's officers were whispering urgently in his ear. But he waved them away. His pride warred with his military training. Pride said to fight, but training said to preserve his forces. 40 seconds. Finally, War Commander Thexul straightened to his full height. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of defeat. The Kethvar fleet will withdraw from the Kepler 442 system, he said formally. All human prisoners will be released immediately. The system will be shared according to galactic law. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. The mighty Kethfor Empire, the most feared military force in the galaxy, had just backed down from a handful of human mining ships. Lisa smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Thank you, War Commander. You've made the right choice." She lifted her communicator. "All human ships, this is Ambassador Carter. Mission accomplished. Stand down and prepare for extraction." The voices of the ship captains came through clearly, filled with relief and pride. "Roger that, Ambassador." Standing down. "It's been an honor, ma'am. We did it. We actually did it." Within hours, the Kethfer fleet had begun its withdrawal from the Kepler 442 system. The human crews were returned safely to their ships, and the antimatter charges were carefully disarmed. The galaxy had witnessed something unprecedented. A peaceful species that had outmaneuvered a military empire through pure strategic brilliance. But the real change was in how the other species looked at humanity. The small, harmless diplomatic mission had revealed itself to be anything but harmless. They had shown that humans were capable of planning several moves ahead, of making sacrifices that other species couldn't imagine, and of turning apparent weakness into devastating strength. As the negotiations concluded with a fair division of the Kepler 442 system's resources, Lisa Carter packed her notebook and prepared to return to Earth. The mission had been a complete success, but she knew it was just the beginning. "Ma'am," Jack said as they prepared to leave, "the other species are asking if we're planning any more diplomatic missions." Lisa looked out at the stars through the ship's viewport. "Tell them that humanity is always willing to negotiate. But also tell them that we're always prepared to do whatever it takes to protect our people." The message was clear. Humanity had taken its place in the galactic community, but on its own terms. They would be peaceful when possible, but they would be dangerous when necessary. As the Harmony's Edge began its journey back to Earth, every alien species aboard had learned the same lesson. Never underestimate a species that values its freedom more than its safety. The galaxy would remember this day as the moment when humanity stopped being seen as harmless newcomers and started being respected as a force to be reckoned with. And it all began with one human woman who appeared weak, but was actually 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. Lisa. Carter's final report would become required reading in diplomatic schools across the galaxy. Its conclusion was simple. In space, strength isn't always measured in ships and weapons. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from the willingness to sacrifice everything for what you believe in. Today, 43 humans proved that our species possesses that strength in abundance. The stars looked down on humanity with new respect. The harmless species from the small blue planet had shown that they were anything but harmless when pushed too far, and the galaxy would never make that mistake again.